If you're trying to go from this to, let's say, this, and you're using low code or no code AI tools, finding just not quite cutting it. Today, I'm going to go through a few simple steps really pretty quickly to talk through things we can do to build the app you want as fast as possible with the least amount of iterations with tools like Replit and Bolt and Lovable. Of course, the first thing is knowing what you want, and that can come in a few different flavors. Now, we looked at this prompt right here. That is sort of what you want, but not really a lot of details to help out a tool to understand exactly what steps it should go through, what features to add, and so on and so forth. So knowing the general idea is certainly the first step. The next step is breaking it down into the details. And when we talk about breaking it down into details, what I recommend doing is creating a product requirement document. And the product requirement document is going to spell out each of the things about your app, the features, who it's for, what it does, steps it goes through, the tech stack that you're going to use, and all those other things that makes it easier for a real developer or a coding assistant tool to build what you're looking for. Hopefully the first time, maybe not the first, second, maybe the third, but way short of 20 times, which you're probably finding is how many times it takes you to get close to what you were looking for in the first place by just sort of vibe coding things out there. Now, you may know exactly what you're looking for, like I did here, and you'll see that I came in here and I told the tool, this is what I want. I want help creating my app using Replit, so it knows what tool I'm building with, and I want it to be similar to this existing application. And I want to use it for personal use. Now, if you've got that information and you know that's what you want, you can pop that into a tool. In this case, I used Grok, and I used the think mode on Grok and spit out the PRD. You may not know exactly what you're looking for. You may not have an existing app that you can pattern off of. And if that's the case, do some research. I like to use Gemini. And so in Gemini, what I did is I just gave it a pretty simple prompt, I think, that says I want to build a finance tracking app like Copilot, which I used there. You could leave that out. You could just say popular finance tracking app and do some research to find me a list of the top features that I should build in. And what that ends up doing is it provides us features that we know other people are going to use, even if I'm building it for personal use. I am building it in a way that it's going to have the features that, if I assume most people want, those are the top features I want too. So either way, get those pieces, do the research, and you'll see here it does a nice job of laying out each of the different pieces that go along with that. Once I've got that research done, then I can pop back into whichever LLM I'm using. Instead of coming in here, building a simple prompt like this, I can come in here and grab this fully fleshed out research and pop that in to build out that PRD that I'm looking for. I know that all went by pretty quickly, but in reality, that's all I really do to start building the apps. And once I've got that piece, I can just come in here. In this case, like I said, I'm using Replit. I can paste in that prompt that I had or paste in that research that I did in Gemini and tell it to build out the application. Now, is it going to build it in a couple seconds? It certainly will not. If it does, you might have an issue there. But in this case, I believe this app, and I'll show you some features in a minute, it's pretty well completed and has all the features I asked for in the PRD. So pretty robust application. And it probably took about 10 minutes to create. I will say too that on the back end of this, and this is just Replit, and this is really important when it comes to creating a good PRD, it's not just getting the right app the first time. It's about doing it as cost effectively as possible. And in this case, I believe I spent about 75 cents on building this app out. And a lot of that is because of Replit's model of doing check-ins versus just usage against the LLMs. So that's important to think about. But the bottom line is, regardless of what tool you use, it's going to be more cost effective if you give it all the details up front than the traditional vibe coding of here's a half of a sentence idea of what I want to build. Iterate on that 40 times because I pay each of those 40 times, plus the usage of rebuilding things and starting over again. Give it what you want the first time. Give it something it can build correctly the first time. It's going to be much more cost effective. And at the end of the video, I'll show you what that 75 cents got for me. Now, a couple things I do once I've got the app and it's sort of that first MVP version, it's working, it's up and going. By the way, this one did have one little error when I went up here to the budgets tab. I got a 500 error for an internal server error, told it fixed it in a couple seconds, figured it out, and that was it. So otherwise the app was up and running one shot completely. I oftentimes will complete the rest of this work, like production work, offline. So I'm going to use something like Visual Studio Code to do the work for me, to do code completion versus full-on spinning up code. And that's a personal preference. So it just helps me track things and think about what I want to do. You may want to keep it in Replit, keep doing this sort of vibe coding thing by coming in here and using this message agent. Totally 100% valid options. But if you do want to pull it down and use for yourself, you have a couple options. Number one is, of course, Replit and Lovable and Bolts are all integrated with GitHub. You can commit a Git for this, take it over to GitHub, be able to use it wherever you'd like, pull it down do a pull from Visual Studio Code, bring it into GitHub. And I do that. It makes life easier. But also, I like to get a copy of this. So if you come over here, at least in Replit, you'll see there's a little folder and 3 dots. From there, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to download this entire project as a zip. So I've got it for myself to do other things with later, and also just to have a backup for it. Totally optional, but it's the way I like to work. And then lastly, just to give you a feel for what we built using this PRD and what we got functionality wise, because that's what matters, right? Pretty is cool, but pretty doesn't pay the bills. We've built essentially a nearly fully functioning finance app. You'll see on the dashboard here, we've got our net worth, our current expenses, our budgets. I don't have recurring expenses, but if I added those in for samples, they'd be there. Investment summary. At the top here, we've got our transactions with our income and our expenses. You see they're all color-coded, which is very cool. I love color-coded chiclets. We can apply filters to it. We can import a CSV, and this is really important. It was part of the PRD, part of the very firm requirements. And that is not only being able to import our data from our bank statement or whatever it is, being able to map it correctly. So the app is expecting the columns in a certain order, right? Well, we can go in every single month or every time we do a download and upload and have to move the columns around on our spreadsheet. Or instead, we can build into the app a mapping process that lets us define column 1 is the date, column 4 is the amount, column 2 is the description. However it comes down from the bank, I can create a mapping. If I have multiple banks, multiple credit cards, whatever it is, create a mapping for each of those. When I do an upload, I just say, use this mapping, and boom, it does the work for me without having to reinvent the wheel every single month. Again, part of the magic of having a PRD when you get started with a low-code, no-code AI tool like this to actually build cool things that you want to use and that users will want to use. So I've got that import in there, which is a nice touch. And then we've got all of the traditional things you would think, the budgeting function, cool little graph up there, all of our cards for our budget. We can edit the budget, create new budgets, add new categories, all of that. We have our net worth, which allows us to load in our assets and our liabilities to see a graph on that and see what the net worth is in total. On the investments page, we have where we can put investments. What is very nice too is it allows us to do quantity and purchase price and current price. So what does that do for us? It allows us to break down the quantity of different things and the different prices, but also get the cost basis. So we know when we bought it, it was worth this. It's worth this now. We haven't purchased any more shares of whatever it is. Maybe we have, but it tells us how much we've earned in income on top of that for tax purposes and just for feeling good about income. So it's built all of that out. You may not care about that. The reason I mention it though is because it's a detailed feature that you may or may not have gotten if you came in here and just said, build me finance tracking app. But because we spelled it out, it did it for us. A couple other quick things in here. We did this import already, and then we have a settings page. This is where we can add new income and expense categories in there. and you would see the mappings for that. So I would consider this a very detailed and nearly totally working application. As a matter of fact, if I want to use it for myself and I want to throw it up on a server, I've got a bunch of Mac minis behind me. I just don't throw things out, that I run different web apps on that we just use in the house here. If I wanted to use this for our personal expenses from within the house or even port into from somewhere else, depending on security reasons, I would have a fully functioning app. Now, if I'm going to go into production on this, is this what I'm going to stay with? No. It has persistent data in a database right now, but there's a bunch of other things we need to add to this. We do need to add a real database. We need to add user authentication, real user authentication, things like that. If we're going to sell it, maybe a payment gateway integration. Those are all complex things. All things that Replit, by the way, not an ad for Replit, has plugins to do. They have their own Replit auth now. They just started a couple weeks ago. They have Stripe integrations, so you can build it out to make it a production app from there. But for 75 cents worth of compute time and check-ins, I was able to get this far with the application. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you could see the tie between building out a decent PRD in just a minute or 2 minutes and helping save a ton of time, save a bunch of money, and actually get to the app you're trying to build faster. If you find videos and information like this useful, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button to be notified of new videos that come out on YouTube. And if you're interested in learning how to build apps correctly that you can go into production with, head on over to launchwithvibe.com. We've got a free ebook there that walks through a lot of the things we talked about in the video today, plus unpacks a lot more things and more details. I highly recommend grabbing that free resource at launchwithvibe.com.